Hello, good afternoon, happy Friday. Feels like Saturday to me, but it's Friday, so happy Friday. I hope you're having a wonderful day. We certainly are. It's a very hot summery day, and we're just having fun. Something came up a couple of times in the last couple of weeks with some clients that is just really, it's very interesting, and we thought we would do a video describing it. So in the title I put weight gain, inner work, chaos and reorganization. Because a lot of people, I mean, they embark upon a personal growth journey, especially when you're coming from the German New Medicine point of view, to resolve conflicts so that you can initiate changes in your perception so that you can overcome perhaps a conflict that you've had going on that's manifesting as physical symptoms, whether that's weight gain, a rash, all sorts of different symptoms that you might be experiencing. Weight gain especially. We've had a lot of questions in the group about weight gain, and so they're addressing this and kind of talking through this, I think, will be very powerful for some of you who may be struggling and wanting results right away and really, hoping that the work that you're doing is moving you in the right direction, but then you're getting signals from your body and you're thinking you're moving in the wrong direction. And so that can lead to more confusion, which makes you frustrated, and that frustration is just continuing a conflict of sorts. And so we wanted to kind of talk through some different options about why that might be happening.
So here's the situation. You start doing your inner work. You start working on resolving your conflicts. You're in the Everyday Life course, or perhaps you're in the Resolve community, whatever. You're doing some stuff, right, to work through your stuff and move towards healing your body, healing your mind, creating the kind of life that you want. You feel like you're doing a good job. There are some ups and some downs, but overall the trajectory is a positive one. And then all of a sudden you discover that you've gained a lot of weight out of nowhere, right? You're feeling really, nothing kind of takes the wind out of your sails quite like that, right? You're doing all this great inner work, and then all of a sudden your outer body, your physical body, something that for most people is a pretty important kind of element, aspect, component of your self-concept. All of a sudden, you've put on this weight, and you don't know why. And you start wondering, well, gosh, something's not working here. I've let myself go. Maybe all the advances, maybe all of the progress that I have made is somehow invalidated as a result of this. Maybe this is causing it. Maybe it's not working. And there's just all sorts of it. It can be a very compelling invitation to focus on what you don't want, to assign meanings to the situation that do not serve you, to lose the momentum, to, if you're moving really well in the direction of focusing on what you want in terms of your health, and perhaps you're getting really good results there, but then you also notice that there's some weight gain going on. It's just one of those things that kind of just gets right at your self-concept and can really kind of derail you. There tends to be an assumption that something's going wrong. And what we want to let you know is that that's not necessarily the case. Weight gain is not a necessary or an intrinsic or an inevitable component of the change process or of the resolution process. But it can be a part of the process if you interact with the process of change in a certain way. And that's what we're going to talk about with you today. So from the normal, like German New Medicine, the perspective here, German New Medicine is not really a method, right? It's just an understanding of the nature of what is called disease, what is called illness, and the connection that exists between physical symptoms, physical bodily adaptive processes, and the individuals, your and my, perception and experience, our subjective experience of ourselves, the world, and other people, of our body, of our environment, and all that stuff. There's no real method there. The idea here is that what is called disease is actually a biological or a bodily attempt to adapt to things that our experience are telling our body about the world in which we're operating due to these conflicts, right? So something happens, you have a conflict about it emotionally, psychically, biologically, the body then starts responding to that by doing these renovations. And then, the symptoms of the renovations, I've got a disease, and that sometimes will cause a conflict too. But German New Medicine doesn't really have anything to do with resolving conflicts, right? In particular, it's just all about the connections that exist between those things. And typically, and for a lot of people, it's like, the solution is just to resolve that individual conflict. Oh, I had a territorial conflict. Oh, I had a self-evaluation conflict. Now that I've resolved that, I can kind of go about my business. It's like, oh, I have a self-esteem issue. I went to go see the therapist, and they helped me with that. And so now I'm just back to doing the things I was doing before. And, that to us is a little bit, it's what's called a kind of remedial change. I have a problem, can you help me fix it? You know, and that's how a lot of people live their lives. You know, they pretty much are on autopilot, on automatic. They're just kind of like unconscious until something demands their attention. I have to do something about this problem. And then you get that problem fixed, or you get the symptoms of that problem kind of covered up, and then you pretty much go back to doing things the way that you were doing them before. The problem with that, of course, is that doing things the way you did them before is what pretty much positioned you to have the problem that you had initially, right? And so of doing things, of perceiving things, of experiencing things the way that you did before, positioned you to have a conflict, or made you susceptible to a conflict, or made you, you know, vulnerable to something in your environment causing a conflict. If you go back to doing things pretty much that same old way, well, probably, you know, something in life is going to happen again that could trigger that same kind of response from you. And so our work, and what the resolve method really is all about, is about not just resolving a single conflict. It's about actually going kind of into, because that to me is like, okay, let's say your house catches on fire, okay, and you call the fire department. The fire department comes out and they extinguish the fire. So we resolve this specific conflict that you're having. And we determine in the course of just kind of doing our fireman stuff that, this was caused by a fuse box. We got an issue with the fuse box here. A spark flew out and caused this fire to happen. From, you know, like in a human situation, it would be something like, okay, you've got a lot of away from values, or you've got a perception of yourself as being really unworthy. That aspect of your personality predisposed you to that self-devaluation conflict that you had. Yes, it did involve your spouse doing that thing that they did. That's a part of it. That was the precipitating factor. But there were things going on inside you. There were things in your internal map of reality, was a phrase that one of my mentors, who actually just passed away a couple of days ago, Bill Harris, that was a phrase that he used. Your internal map of yourself, the world, other people, how you relate to these things. That had a role in you having that conflict that led to that self-evaluation, that led to the symptoms that you were having. And so it's like the fire department comes, we put out the fire, and then we don't do anything about the fuse box. We know that the fuse box is what caused this thing to happen, but we just extinguish the fire, and then we go back to business like before. It's like, well, that's better than leaving the fire going, but, you know, do you think that that fuse box might cause a fire again? Do you think that there might be another problem there? The resolve method involves resolution of the conflict, of course, but then it involves really doing some deep inner work to the structure of your map of reality, of your way of representing yourself, the world, and other people, your perceptions, your experiences. You know, those things, they don't come from nowhere, right? There are ways that you think, ways that you store information, ways that you perceive information, ways that you just sort of relate to things, patterns of focusing, tending to emphasize one aspect of your situation over another. Those are all things that are a part of your personality, a part of your internal map, and those things are more or less resourceful for you. And if they're less than resourceful, doing some inner work to change those things is tremendously important. That's what makes you anti-fragile. That's what prevents the stuff from happening in the future. It's also the stuff that positions you to really consciously and intentionally create the kind of life that you want. Not just to avoid conflicts, not just to survive, but to really thrive as a human being, you know, to create an enriched perception and an enriched experience of what it's like to be you. The thing about this, though, when you start changing this stuff around, where did this map of reality come from? You put it together kind of like ad hoc, just kind of spur of the moment as you were growing up, as a way of coping with, adapting to, surviving the environment in which you grew up, right? It was, you know, you grew up around caregivers, parents, you know, in school, different stuff happened, and it was like, okay, I don't want to be blamed, so I've got a value that's like away from being blamed. I've got a belief that I can't trust people. I've got a belief about myself that I'm not good enough, and those things served some function at some point in your life, and therefore they're very closely associated with safety. They're very closely associated with avoiding danger, with, in other words, survival in that biological sense. And so when we start changing that stuff, right, we're going to go in there and we're going to start examining those things. By the way, we're going to start becoming aware of those things. And now, when you become aware of something that doesn't serve you, awareness really is synonymous with positive change, right? You can't do something, here's another Bill Harris thing, you can't do something that doesn't serve you and do it with awareness, right? So to say that you're becoming aware of those aspects of your internal map that aren't serving you, that is initiating the change process. In and of itself, those things begin to change. You ever hear, like, people sometimes will over-identify with certain things. They'll start to think that certain beliefs, they identify with their map. They think their map is them. Sometimes when I'm working with people, they love the changes, everything's going really great, and then all of a sudden they freak out. Everything goes from great to like, I don't know who I am. I feel like yesterday I was ready to take over the world. I was new and improved me. Now I'm a different person. And something happened from yesterday and today. I went from yesterday being like a better version of me. Now I've changed so much. I kind of up-leveled to a degree where I'm now actually literally a different person. And I feel kind of uneasy about that. I feel kind of unsure about that. I feel kind of intimidated by this new unfamiliar territory.
I totally had that experience. And the funny thing is back when I had all of kind of my, initial becoming aware and changing my internal map of reality and the way that I perceive myself, the world, and other people, I didn't know about GNM, but I'm almost certain I know I had so many kind of existential conflicts that definitely, I'm sure I put on a few pounds during that time. If I had been aware of the connection, I could have made it. But because it did, for me, it was very kind of unsettling in a sense. I mean, I really, at certain points, felt like my existential rug. Like, I set up this, I know how things are. This is what I believe about myself. This is what I believe about the universe. This is, I had all my beliefs like they were dogmatic, entrenched, like that was me the way that I was. And so as I started like having more mental flexibility and thinking about things in new and different ways, like it was fun and exciting because I saw the freedom there, and I saw that I could choose to think about situations and things in different ways that served me more, and that I didn't have to like stick to this rigid dogma of seeing myself and interacting with people in the way I've always done it. And so it was that kind of like both sides of it. I feel really excited and invigorated by this new view, but also a part of me feels very unsafe because that she felt like that was her. She thought that all of these things were her, this map, like, and so as the lines started blurring, her identity was at stake. Her existence was at stake because she doesn't exist anymore. Just so you know, she's gone. That girl, who started becoming aware, what was it, 6-7 years ago? Mm-hmm. She doesn't exist anymore. And so it was kind of right of her to be concerned about her existence.
Well, and there's two things that happen there. One is that you think you're your map. And what I mean by that is not that you intellectually think that you're your map of reality, but you, at a kind of visceral level, your sense of self, your sense of identity is tied up with this map of reality, or this kind of like almost a graven image, this model that you've created inside your mind to represent yourself. Like when you think of yourself, there are certain things that come to mind. You know what I mean? And those are things that have all kind of been placed there and accumulated there over time. And, it's a representation of who you are, but it's not literally who you are. So, we can become very attached to those things. At the same time, those things can start to think they're us. They become conscious, this map of reality almost. And so systems tend to be self-perpetuating. If I set up a belief system, if you ever notice this, if someone believes something, it's kind of like the law of physics. Like an object that's in motion tends to remain in motion. I think it's the way it needs to be or something. These systems tend to be that way too. And, it fights for survival. Because again, this is coming back kind of to the GNM perspective. It's this idea that like your map of reality developed to help ensure your survival. We're talking about literal physical survival. We're talking about emotional survival. We're talking about your map figure, your map almost assembled itself unconsciously as a means of getting the strokes that you needed, the acceptance that you needed to survive emotionally, psychologically, and perhaps also physically, depending on the environment in which you grew up. And so it's intrinsically connected to survival. And so when you start changing that stuff, like this map has kept you alive up until this point, you start changing that stuff, there's a point at which the other than conscious aspects of yourself begin to say, well, hang on a second, what's going on here? It's kind of like in life we're in free fall. It's like when we were born, we jumped out of an airplane. And we're free falling down. We haven't pulled our parachute yet, but it's almost like the brain feels like we are. This is what personal growth is. The brain feels like we are making design changes to our parachute when we're already in free fall. And the brain's saying, "Excuse me, we jumped out of the airplane with a plan here, and you've got your scissors out and your sewing kit, and that's fine that you want to be doing that stuff, but we've got a system that's worked well enough in the past. What on earth are you trying to do to change that?" And I think that when you start to make those really deep kind of bedrock, fundamental changes to your internal map, to your beliefs, to your values, to your patterns of seeing yourself, to your self-concept, that can actually, you can feel like you're losing yourself, right? Because if you've identified with those things, if you've identified with the experiences that map or that model of reality creates, sometimes people find themselves in a really interesting situation where they get freaked out because their experience improved so much. They spent so much time being anxious, or so much time being jealous or angry or offended. And, they don't want consciously to feel that way. And so we work with them, and they, by degrees, develop their awareness. They develop their ability to not feel that way anymore. It's a good feeling, but there's a certain point where the unfamiliarity of this new and improved experience almost starts to trigger resistances. There's just this feeling of a lack of safety. It's kind of like, it makes me think about like the classic situation where two people are together and one of the partners starts to get in really, really good shape. And the other partner is like, hey, this is okay, this is pretty. But there's a certain point at which that partner almost maybe begins to worry. And they're like, oh, wait, no, you're looking really good now, and I'm wondering what's going on, right? Different is good, but too different, even if it's good different, can kind of start to make us wonder because it starts to become unfamiliar. And so, actually creating those changes, the changes that are going to bulletproof you or make you anti-fragile against conflict in the long term, can actually, depending on how you react to it, depending on how you relate to it, depending on how prone you are to resistance, can trigger potentially an existence conflict. That the actual change process itself can be the source of a kind of existential conflict. Now, it's not that the resolve method or whatever you're doing, meditating, just whatever, it's not that it's causing that conflict. Remember, this is the map itself. This is your stuff inside your head and your way of relating to the world that really is the determining factor there. And it's your tendency to resist, my tendency to resist. I had a tremendous tendency to start resisting things after a certain point, whether they were good or bad or neutral or whatever. If they changed past a certain point, I would resist. And to the degree that I resisted, I would be over my emotional threshold. I would suffer. I would predispose myself to being conflicted. Now, the interesting thing about these existence conflicts, what are they associated with, right? Weight gain. So, let's say you have a self-evaluation conflict and you stumble upon German medicine and you say, oh, wait, this is related to my subjective experience. Okay, I want to do something about this. Oh, the resolve method, what's that? Oh, these people seem like they kind of maybe know what they're talking about. They have a neat strategy here. Let me start working on that. Okay, so you've got a self-evaluation conflict. You realize it's because, you've devalued yourself. You then start working on things like your values or your beliefs. You're in the resolve program. You're learning about the anatomy of a conflict. You start making changes to yourself. You start becoming aware of those aspects of your self-concept that are not serving you. And as you become aware of those things naturally begin to fall away if they're not serving you. There's a certain threshold of just interchange there at which some other than conscious part of you may begin to resist emotionally. And if that resistance is strong enough, it's possible that that will initiate an existence conflict where basically, biologically, your body says, wait a minute. So it's no different than if you were to come home and to find that basically, let's say that your house was just obliterated, it was just gone. You come home, long day, you're tired, you want to lay down on your couch, and your house just isn't there, right? That's an external change that was dramatic, it was overwhelming, it was shocking. A lot of the stuff that we look at in the resolve method, a lot of the stuff that we work with is stuff that people never even think about in their whole life, let alone change, let alone actually develop conscious choice with regard to. The aspects of your model that aren't necessary, you're looking under the hood, and you're kind of looking under a hood that you were never really supposed to consciously look under. And so you start changing that stuff, and it's like, the place where you can go in your computer, you can open up, it's like utilities. It's like that folder that they tell you don't go in there. We're going in there, and we're showing you how to change things in that source code, right? Because we got some bugs in our software sometimes that are causing us to create things that we don't want. When you go in there, though, there's a part of you that's wondering whether or not you should be in there. There's a part of you that's saying, wait a minute, why are you tinkering with those values, with those beliefs, with those, we've gotten you through a lot of tough situations by making you believe that you're not worthy of other people's love because you've been on the lookout, and who knows what kind of bad things you've avoided. And, when you resist those things, it's possible that conflict will occur. Now, the good thing about this, there's two good things, I think, that are about this. One is that it's not inevitable. To the degree that you deliberately accept or do not resist that sensation of change, and this is just getting familiar with the feeling of change, getting familiar with that chaos and reorganization, yet another Bill Harris thing we learned. The conflict's not inevitable. The other good thing is that The thing that we are changing is the source of the conflict itself. So if you experience an existence conflict as a result of upgrading the map of reality that predisposed you to having that conflict in the first place, the same things that you are doing that kind of, created the experience that registered as a conflict, those same things will resolve those aspects of your internal map that caused that conflict in the first place. It's the chaos and it's the reorganization. It's the, you ever go to a store or to a website and it's like, excuse our mess, we're renovating to improve your experience. It's that kind of a thing. It's, excuse our mess. The important thing, I think, is that you recognize if you're resisting, this is something that could happen, not something that will happen, but if you tend to resist things, if you tend to kind of get worried about things, if that that's a thing that you do, if you're doing really great quality inner work, and you notice, gosh, I've been feeling really, really good, but my clothes aren't fitting quite the same way, I feel like I put on a couple of pounds, maybe more than a couple of pounds, in that moment in time, you want to be able to understand that that is a sign of positive change. You want to be able to understand that, in order sometimes, if you can imagine life is like a big circle and you're right in the middle, and an improvement represents going out towards those edges. I can go out a certain distance here, but then if I want to go over here and improve this area too, I've got to come back to the center and go in that area. I can't move out maximally in all directions at once. I kind of have to target one area and go for it. Do the inner work. Doing the inner work, if you've got to gain a few pounds, right, in order to gain conscious control, or to learn not to resist the process of upgrading the internal software that's running your experience and your body and everything that you're creating in your external reality, it's worth it. You know what I'm saying? It's easy to lose 5 or 10 or 15 or 20 or 30 or 40 or even 50 pounds. It's easy to do that once you understand where your experience is coming from. Once you've got the degree of awareness that you're going to have as a result of going through these processes, give yourself the advantage of a resourceful meaning assignment, right? This doesn't mean you have to go do that, but if you notice that, there are some changes in your body in the initial stages that you're not thrilled about, and if you say, gosh, I have been experiencing some upheaval, I have been feeling somewhat chaotic, I have been kind of riding a wave of change, maybe that's what's going on there. That's a much more resourceful meaning, a more empowering meaning, a more useful meaning, a more true meaning than, gosh, I thought I was making great progress, but I've gained 15 pounds. I'm just fat and worthless, just like I always knew. And then you give yourself a self-evaluation conflict. It's just not necessary. And that really learning to respond resourcefully to that definitely carries the seed of greater benefit.
Yeah, I think being aware that, because what's the tendency? I mean, when you do gain weight, it's like, okay, what am I doing wrong? It's like, now it's time to freak out. Now it's time to, we do extreme things, like we'll stop eating or go exercise intensely. Yeah, but when you really think through all of that, it's like, well, what is the only solution? So here I am, I'm having an experience, there's physical changes that I'm noticing, and it's like that bubble getting wider of acceptance of physical present reality. It's never the right moment to start freaking out about something, because as soon as you start panicking and worrying and being stressed out about something, that's more signs of not safe to your nervous system, which means more adaptation. Kind of more of what you don't want comes from that type of focus. And so when you get to a point when you've got extreme physical pain, or you are, you're retaining a lot of water and you've put on more weight than you're happy with, or any weight at all, even a couple of pounds can make a big difference for a person. It's like, okay, what's going on? Did I change my nutrient? Did I eat it? Am I doing anything? No, I bet this is coming from this upheaval. It's having a better story to tell yourself. It's having a story, an explanation, an understanding that makes sense, that brings you peace, that, says this too shall pass, like you can gain a bunch of weight and lose a bunch of weight in just a couple of days. Our bodies are always changing. They're always fluctuating. And so your response to what's happening right now determines what's coming next. And so when you remember that how you respond and how you feel right now in this moment is going to determine, how your body responds in the next given moment, you can kind of stay out ahead of it. Remember, everything about now, everything about physical reality as it is right now, it's all old news. Diagnosis, old news. Physical body right now, old news. It's the manifestation of something that's already happened, already is done and gone. And so when you are taking this control, you've got to stay on that leading edge. You've got to stay up in the creative realm of imagined reality, of focusing on what you want and clearly seeing what you want. And when you say, okay, you know what, I'm noticing this, that's so interesting. That's such a interesting feedback from my body. That must mean that there's chaos and reorganization. You know, that must mean that I'm retaining more water because a part of me is feeling like it's dying away. And you know what? A part of me is dying away. And I recognize that because I feel more able to respond to my partner in a way that's resourceful for me. And before, I would just blow up, or I would just respond reflexively. But now I'm thinking more, and so that explosive, responsive, reactive person, she doesn't really exist. And so when you really kind of give yourself that space to see that this is a sign of growth, this is a sign of improvement, this is a sign that you are making the changes where the changes need to be made, and this isn't permanent. You know, and that's the thing, is when we start telling ourselves that the way things are right now, they're so bad, and I'm going to get upset because I don't want them to be this way forever. Know that it will change. It absolutely will change. Change is the only constant. It is already changing based on your focus and based on how you're feeling in this moment. And it's, you know, can you let it be okay? Can you let it be okay that, you know, things are as they are right now and they're molding into something new?
To me, it's really interesting because it's an over-identification, right? So your beliefs, your values, your body, your patterns of focusing, those things are, you are those things. Those things are a part of who you are. They're not the whole of who you are. It's not the whole story, right? You know, my values, my beliefs, my patterns of focusing, my feelings, that I am those things. That's not all that I am, right? I'm a sort of a greater kind of encompassing ecology that includes that. But it's an interesting thing. If you can imagine, this always really helps me, like these kind of like analogies, because it's like, if I can see what I'm doing in a moment in time and see how it's really the same as something that's really obviously silly to me, that helps me to like just get it at an experiential level. It's like, oh, you know, it's okay that I'm doing this silly thing right now, but I'm aware of how silly this thing is. Imagine, you know, like we're constantly kind of shedding skin cells. You know, like they're always coming off. People clip their fingernails, their toenails very frequently, or they go to the manicurist or whatever. Where, you know, hair is constantly kind of falling out and replacing itself. All these different things are happening. Very few people are really over-identified with their skin, with little dead skin cells that fly off. But just imagine what an experiential crisis I could create for myself if I felt like I was losing myself every time I did this. If I had like some kind of microscopic glasses that would let me see how much of me I'm losing at every moment in time. Every time I do this, it's like I'm just going off into thin air. Oh, I'm losing it, I'm losing it, I'm losing it. That's what it's the same thing to be really upset about changing our values, changing our beliefs, about changing what we think about changing what's important to us. It's just that we happen to be wired in such a way that we tend to identify more with our self-concept, with our map of reality, than we do with parts of our body that are obviously not essential to really who we are. But when you recognize that, you know, it's as natural, right, to kind of slough off or to lose or to shed skin cells. It's as natural to lose and to shed beliefs, particularly the ones that are not serving you, to shed patterns of thinking, for relationships to evolve, sometimes for them to evolve into non-existence or to a dramatically different arrangement. And when you recognize that, when you recognize kind of how healthy and intrinsic change is to this whole thing, you can respond to it resourcefully. And what that means is, what resource, it doesn't mean respond to it in the right way. It means respond to it in a way that improves what it's like to be you, that improves the quality of your experience. Because when you kind of start dancing with this thing, when you kind of let go and you recognize that what you're holding on to isn't there, what you're clinging to is gone. By the time you have the urge to cling to something, that thing is already gone. Then you just say, oh, so I guess there's just almost no point in tensing up. You relax, you begin naturally just to adapt and to evolve and to grow and to expand and to become the you that you really want to be. And so I think it's all just a really good thing. Ultimately, it's just an example of meaning assignment. It's permission to respond resourcefully to something that might be going on for you. It's like if you've got, let's say, your physical body and you've got your self-concept. For so many people, they look at their physical body or they feel their physical body and they mold their self-concept onto that. What has to happen eventually is that you've got to put your self-concept out ahead of everything else. You've got to put your self-concept out ahead of where your body is right now. You have to put your self-concept out ahead of where your relationship is right now, where your financial status is right now, where your ability to be the kind of person you want to be in physical reality. Maybe there are things that you want to do that you're physically or some other way incapable of doing at this moment in time. you have to put your self-concept out in front of that, which is to say you have to feel yourself, feel from the place of being able to do the things that are important to you, feel from the place of responding resourcefully to the state that your body is in, feel from the place of being in the kind of physical condition that you really want to be in. From that place of self, it just feels so good for self-acceptance to be a natural and an automatic thing. A thing that you don't have to think about anymore. You don't have to talk about it anymore. It's just a given. It's just kind of the bedrock, really, of who you are, is that you just kind of appraise what's going on with you mentally, emotionally, physically, and you just respond resourcefully to it. What does that mean? Well, it means that you respond in a way that improves what your experience is. And when you give yourself that level of flexibility and that level of spontaneity and authenticity and just kind of a utilitarian response to your experience, you start to do a really wonderful kind of like jazz improvisation. Well, that's what life becomes. And you just kind of handle whatever happens as it comes up. So
yeah, another thing for that's really helpful is this great, I just love this analogy of, your self-concept is like, it's where you're going. It's where you already feel yourself to be. And it's like if you're on a road trip from Detroit to Miami, you might hate Atlanta. You might really hate driving through Atlanta traffic. You might hate everything about it. Maybe you just dislike Atlanta so much.
Someone would almost think that you lived in Atlanta for too long at some point.
I like Atlanta. I actually, after being gone from it for a while, I do see Atlanta was great. But if you're driving through Atlanta, and if you get so caught up about how much you hate Atlanta, and that's what we do when we're passing through a state, when we mistake something going on in our body right now at this given moment for the reality of us, like who we are. It's a state you're passing through. It truly, you're on your way to somewhere else. You have a different destination. If your concept of yourself is identified, you're like, I know where I'm going. You don't get worried about a little Atlanta traffic. You don't, because you're so excited about where you feel yourself to be, which is in Miami on the beach and, having a cocktail and enjoying yourself. And you're, so you can be where you are physically, uncomfortable, in pain, overweight. Your body isn't the way you want it to be. Your bank account's not the way you want it to be. Your relationship isn't. All of this stuff in your life could be literally falling apart. But when you've got this strong self-concept and you're so identified with your destination and you just absolutely know, and that's the thing, it's a certainty thing, because you get to a point where you're like, maybe I won't get there. Maybe I won't get there. Maybe there's something wrong with me. Maybe I need to do something different. Maybe I need to take a different route. Maybe I did the wrong thing. Maybe I messed up when I was young, and maybe all of these things we start telling, it's a story. We should start telling ourselves a story that makes it not okay that we are where we are. We don't even know how to get where we're going. We forget really who we are, and we get lost in this woods. We get lost in Atlanta because we stopped focusing on our destination. And so remembering who you are, the self-concept, having that, again, like you said, right out front and say, oh, I know I'm going there. I know I can get there. I know it's absolutely 100% possible for me to get there. You know what? And I can even, love the process. I can even say, you know what? I know that this is an ever-changing state of being, and I'm going to get where I want to go. This is chaos and reorganization. My nervous system, my body, my concept of it's all in shift, in flux, and I'm okay with it. And your ability to do that, it's huge.
I think that's a huge thing there, because like when you're like that whole chaos and reorganization, like what we're remodeling here really is the wiring that gives rise to what it's like to be you. We're actually going into the source code that creates your experience of resistance, experience of existence, the world of your mind. Like we're doing an operating system upgrade. And like when you can't do an operating system upgrade on your computer and do work on the computer at the same time. You got to save all the stuff. It's got to then go do its thing in the little bar that takes, moves like this far over 3 hours, and then it gets right up to the end, and you're like, okay, this is 99% done, but then that last 1% takes 99% of the time. Like, it's like that, in some senses, and it's like, you have to allow yourself to refresh, to go offline a little bit. You have to, if you're used to, typing 900 words a minute, and you make 450 errors, right? And you realize, oh, this is because my software is messed up. Let me do the operating system upgrade. Well, you're going to have to stop typing long enough to do that, right? You might have to take a little time off of like blam ahead in every area of life that's working for you. And your average words per minute is going to really take a dip down when you're restarting your computer. But when you get it back up again, and when you press an A, it prints an A, and a B is a B, and a W is a W, and all this great stuff, when it's working properly, your average is going to go up big time. And I think just recognizing that, like that downtime, it's like high performance engines, high performance cars, they go to the shop more often, because they're more precise, they are more... Like, I think of your mind, your brain as being like Stradivarius, like a really wonderful instrument, like a harpsichord. It's a living instrument, it has to be tuned very frequently. That's why meditation is so important. That's why just conscious and intentional, resourceful focusing, how you use your mind matters. How you use your mind determines how, the degree to which it stays in tune. If I'm just like, blamming on a piano just for fun, it's going to go out of tune faster than if I'm playing it in a way that's pleasing, and if I'm striking the keys with as much force as necessary, not more. And I think that when you just appreciate that fact that like this is a fine kind of cosmic instrument that I'm working with, you just kind of, you let it be okay, and you just sort of you start to really engage with that process, and you start just letting it be okay that you are where you are. And when you do that, a wonderful thing happens. You feel so much better, and you'll notice, and this happens without exception, if you'll just not talk shit to yourself, if you'll just like let yourself be okay, let it be okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 days in a row, 6 days in a row. You got a certain criteria. There's a certain number of days that you're willing to go without beating yourself up. And if something good doesn't happen, like something like blow your socks off good, if you don't really perform something wonderful as a result of not nagging yourself in that set period of time, then you really nag yourself, right? You're like, okay, I gave myself a chance and it didn't work, and then you double back. If you'll go one day beyond that, I promise you amazing things will happen. It's always one day beyond where you've always gone before. If you'll be nice to yourself for 1 hour longer than you normally would be, and then be nice to yourself for 1 hour longer than that, good things will begin to happen as we plant these seeds. And it's like the thing with the guy in the mine, and like he's digging and he stops like one,
3 feet from gold.
Yeah, it's like that. But we plant these seeds in our mind. We start working on our self-concept, and then we check our waistline, right? Or we check our thoughts, or we check our emotions, or we check our bank account, or whatever, and we say, oh, see, it doesn't work. And we dig the seed up the moment before the sprout was about to happen. You water these things until they grow. If you decide you're going to have a child, and you're expecting it to be about 9 months, I'm saying, okay, we're expecting 9 months the child's going to be ready, and it's 9 months and a few days. You don't cancel the thing, right? The child comes out when the child comes out. I mean, the child comes out when the child's ready to come out, right? And you're that way too. The you that you want to be, the self-concept kind of that you are nursing within yourself. When's it going to come out? When's it going to come out? When's it going to come out? It's going to come out when it comes out. You understand? And it's our job, my job, to wait for the me that I desire to be, to come out of the me that I am. And I need to, if I'm cooking a turkey and I'm opening that thing every 5 minutes, it's going to take a lot longer. That's what self-criticism really is. That's what obstructing that process really is. And I guess just discovering that the fertilizer, right, the really good organic soil that lets this whole thing grow is not self-criticism. It's like all that crap that they sell at like Home Depot and stuff like that. It's this nasty, it lives in nitrogen. It's just nasty stuff. It's just not good for or it might make your stuff look good, but it's kind of devoid of nutrient. And that's kind of like what self-criticism is. Self-criticism, I think, has been marketed to us as like, oh, it's discipline, oh, it's willpower, oh, you got to be tough on yourself, oh, you're sort of like, you're going to be like Rocky Balboa if you really just talk shit to yourself 24/7. You'll really get things done. You'll whip yourself into shape. You pull yourself up by your bootstraps. It's like, well, it might be fertilizer, but it's also poison. Why don't you nourish yourself with something? It's not just going to make you sort of look good and then kill you, but it's actually going to really enrich you sort of from the inside out. And that's really, I think, what the Resolve method is about. It's not the method is designed to create within you a different pattern of relating to yourself. And, oh, by the way, resolve all of these biological conflicts that are causing untold symptoms and weight gain and pretty much everything that you can think of. German New Medicine has made a connection between subjective experience and this physical stuff. But also, you literally become a new person. New person has a new body, has a new physical expression, new relationships with other people. Everything just starts to change. And when you know how to let that change be okay, and you recognize if there's something about me that can change, that must not be intrinsically who I am. If there's something that's possible for me to lose, I probably don't need to worry about losing that thing. Because the essential essence really of who I am is unlosable. I can't lose that thing. And so if I get worried about the feeling of giving up some habit or some pattern or some way of being or some aspect of myself, if it's possible to lose it, then I don't need to worry about losing it. And if it's not possible to lose it, I really don't need to worry about losing it, because it's not going to happen. And you just sort of, you're free falling, but instead of free falling like this, you loosen up and you enjoy it, and you can do some really cool stuff on the way down, and you can have a lot of fun. And that's the way it's supposed to be.
Yes, so I hope you guys got some good stuff out of this, because I think it is a really real topic, and it can be very hard to be going through, a physical state that's uncomfortable, whatever that might be for you, which is pretty much, what the healing phase is all about, depending, sometimes it's in the conflict active, if it's weight gain, but, when there's things going on that you're not happy about, the way you respond to it is so important. And, freaking out is never the answer. It always is, let's find a way of thinking about this, a story to tell ourselves about this that's going to allow us to get from where we are to where we want to be. And just stay focused and know that wherever you are, it's not, it's not permanent. It's changing. It's already changing. It's constantly changing, and your thoughts are really, they're guiding where your body's going, what changes are coming next. And so, take comfort in that, and excitement. I mean, be excited, because you are going somewhere you want to be. Just don't get so, caught up in Atlanta. Don't get so caught up with where you are right now, because you are moving. And so just remembering that, I think, is super, super helpful. If you have not checked out the Resolve program yet, please, I'll put a link in there. Just check it out. I think that a lot of you are really, really going to love what is in the program. There's modules, there's guided meditations, and your feedback helps us build, new great stuff to put in it next month. And so, yeah, it's going to be, it's a really, really exciting new thing that we've created. So please check it out and let us know what you think. And we love you. Let us know how we can help you if you have any questions, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Happy Friday.
See ya.